Welcome back to the Strandalong Diaries. This is episode 3, and the Strandalong Diaries are my way of documenting my journey through the Strandalong that I'm hosting on my podcast throughout the month of August? It's October, it's going well already. October 2016, and possibly a little bit into November, depending on how things go. Now, last episode, you'll have noticed that I had cracked on and got my cast on sorted for my Latvian Mittens, which come in this lovely kit from which I bought in Riga, which is all very traditional Latvian stuff, and the pattern is really, really gorgeous. I'm not very good at this, I have to say, and well, let me show you how I'm getting on. Here it is, and don't get me wrong, I think it's a really, really lovely pattern. I think the resulting mittens are going to be gorgeous. They genuinely are. I love the fringe. I think it's really, really fun. Now that I've figured out how to do it, I'm really, really happy with that. What I'm less happy with is my tension. I think I've put it down to the fact that I'm so used to double knitting, which is really, really forgiving in terms of tension. I just knit, I don't really think about it, and it's really stretchy and it can really stand up to a lot of discrepancy. Not so with stranded work, and my tension is pretty abominable, I have to say. Do you know what? It's hard to see that on screen, so please don't write in and go, oh, it looks fabulous. I mean, it looks all right on the screen. Close up, it's really not. There's a lot of puckering, and I know a lot of stuff will come out in the block, but for lots of reasons, I'm going to rip this out and start again. It was only a day. This was a day's worth of knitting. So yeah, I've really, really figured out the fringe. Gorgeous. And here are the reasons why I'm going to be ripping it out. I've noticed I've actually made a slight error when I was recharting the chart. Rather than just following the chart on the piece of paper that I've got down here that comes with the pattern there, because if you remember in the last episode I had gone down to 60 stitches from 72 because the first attempt was huge on my hand. That meant that I wasn't able to just follow the chart. Handily, this chart is 36 stitches across, which would mean that if I were doing a 72 stitch mitten, it would just wrap round beautifully, repeating across twice for every round of the mitten itself. So of course, going down to 60, I had to rechart everything, and although I hadn't got onto the main body of the pattern, this sort of almost Celtic looking section here, I had done these roses. Now obviously you can see there's 2 roses on there, which would have meant 4 roses on the mitten, but I spread things out a bit, so I've got only 3 roses on my mitten. And all was going fairly well. Of course, spreading things out has meant that for the rounds with the yellow in, look how much space there is in between. There's going to be a lot of space anyway, but I think it would have been a little bit less space had I kept it before, and that's caused problems on the back. It is, after all, stranded knitting. 4 colours, difficult for me. Not even very good at 2, so 4 is tough work. I've been given some handy tips for next time round, and I may just go along with them in terms of doing the 4 colour rounds. Not all of the rounds have 4 colours, but some of them do. To do the rounds in 2 passes. So do the first 2 colours and go round, slipping all the stitches which are not either of those 2 colours and working all the stitches that are. And then on the next pass, picking up the other 2 colours, slipping the stitches I've just worked with the first 2 colours and working the previously slipped stitches with the new colours in that round. It's a complicated sentence. I hope that makes sense. I think I'm going to give that a go because it might help a lot rather than trying to juggle with 4 separate strands of yarn. It's really quite difficult. And I'd made a little error. That was the point I was getting around to, wasn't it? I'd made a little error and you wouldn't notice it, but I know it's there and it bugs me. However, I could have lived with that now that I'm past that section. I really could. The big deal here is gauge. Now, I reduced the size of my stitches, because the number of my stitches, because it was a very, very big mitten. That was when I'd got to sort of this section here, and as you can see, no stranding. It just hadn't occurred to me, dear OSATers, that that was all the bit with no stranding, and that stranding would change the gauge immeasurably. This mitten is now tiny. Not happy about that. Barely get it on. I mean, it does go round, but it's a real struggle to get it over, and of course it will be there at that point because I know that's where the thumb is, but my hand's going to get an awful lot bigger. So yes, I can force it on. It's quite restrictive, and you know, it will look absolutely lovely, don't get me wrong. I really, really will thoroughly enjoy it when it's made, but it needs to be a lot bigger. And I think that's down to me just being a little bit foolish and not really understanding. So actually stretching it out like that does do wonders for the gauge. I think a good block would probably help that no end. But I am going to go back. I'm going to rip back, and why don't we start now? Let's live on the Strandalong Diaries. Let's pull out my DPNs. There's no return. I'm doing this so much at the moment. So that's the beginning of it. Let's start pulling it back, shall we? So I am going to go back to 72 stitches, and I think that's probably for the best. I now am quite good at doing the fringe, so that's not going to cause me too many problems. And I shall continue, and the good news is it means that I will be able to go back to using the original version of the chart provided with the pattern, so I don't have to do any clever shenanigans or any mucking about. I can just, here we are, it's all these colours, it's disappearing before your very eyes. I can just go back to using it as written with my 72 stitches, and the pattern will wrap around twice, and that will be marvellous. And what won't be marvellous is having to untangle these 4 strands of yarn when I get to that point. However, I think it will be worth it. We all know, don't we, dear knitters, all, that if something's not right, if something's not working for you, then the best thing to do is get rid. And if you don't get rid, you'll live to regret it. So I think what I shall just do is I shall take solace in the fact that I'm doing the right thing by this mitten. It might mean that I'm a little bit behind everyone else. Obviously there's FOs in the Strandalong FOs thread on my Groupon Ravelry, which is wonderful, and I love that. However, it's going to be better all round that I get this to a stage that I'm really, really pleased with it. If I don't do it, if I don't rip all of this back, then I'll have put all this effort into something that I'm really not that interested in saving, certainly not that interested in wearing. So I just think it's all for the best. It's like it never happened. See you on the next episode.